Well, what led into the nervous system work was that I had never really, I mean, now I can see that I had been very anxious, you know, all kinds of things that I had. But I was also very resilient. So I could be with myself, like I could be with, or I could freeze big emotions, but still live my life pretty well. And I was a good functional freezer. And so very good at that. And that was not a problem until I became a parent. And when I became a mother, you know, that was what came up. I lost everything. That was my structure. So I was really at the bottom, and I had never been there before. And so my nervous system, I started feeling myself just tighten up into this knot of like catharsis, like, whoa, you know, I had to go out in the yard and just like scream, and like, I'm just like, oh my God, the neighbors, I don't care, I have to, you know. But it was a really tough time for me. And so, but somehow, I don't remember so much from this time because I was so drained, but somehow I started Googling. I'm like, God, nervous system. I'm like, I'm messed up. I need something. I do not have the tools for this.
Hey everyone, it's Irene Lyon here, and you just saw a very short clip of the interview to follow with a friend, a student, and a fellow somatic practitioner colleague, Anja Bergh. She is in Sweden, and we talked earlier this summer actually about her journey, her origin story. And I wanted to share her story with you because I know there's many who follow me here who might be in her world or are sort of inching towards the desire to do more somatic nervous system practice with their existing practice. She is by trade a yoga instructor. She has studied body-mind centering. This is the work of Bonnie Bainbridge-Cohen. And then she found me and my work via Smart Body, Smart Mind. And she's blending it all together. So I wanted to bring her on, talk to her, share her story with you. Towards the end, for those of you Swedes who speak the Swedish language, she has a lovely note of inspiration and encouragement for everyone. And just enjoy the conversation. It's a fun conversation. It's a light conversation. We share our kind of battle stories, if you will, around being in this very new field of working with the body, the mind, the environment in our very crazy and fast and changing world here on planet Earth. Enjoy, and anything we talked about during our interview will be somewhere near this video in the Show More section or on the blog post where you might be watching this. Take very good care, enjoy, and we will see you next time. Anya, hello, welcome.
Thank you.
So I wanted to talk to you because you are a yoga instructor, but you're more than that. And you did Smart Body, Smart Mind years ago.
Yes, 4 or 5 years ago, I think. Yeah. So
4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow. But what I wanted to do, because one of the things we get a lot of questions around are folks who have gone into some kind of mind-body practice like you have, and then they've completely sort of turned a corner and entered into this nervous system work, somatic work, and they're always figuring out how to blend all these pieces. And I know you have done that.
Yes.
With your practices. So my one way we might start is like 20 years ago, what were you doing? Were you teaching the work you're teaching now? Obviously, probably not to the same degree, but what was your entry point into the mind-body world?
Yeah.
Give me your story.
Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, by accident, I would say. Actually, by accident. I wasn't one of those who actually, consciously was searching for something, but I was searching for something like everyone else is. But I was a dancer and I was a snowboarder, and I moved to the States when I was 20, and I was supposed to just go visit. But I ended up moving there because I fell in love, met a guy, got married, at a young age. And I was so broke and I couldn't afford my dance classes. So, snowboarding, and then I wanted to go and take my dance classes, but a friend of mine that I was riding with, she was a yoga instructor. And so she said, just come for free. You can come take my classes. And I went, and, I found community, like I found friends. I found there was something we did in a group setting that I was used to, and I loved that. And then I got to learn about yoga, and it pulled me in. Now it's 25 years ago or something like that, and so I started, and I practiced a lot. I had a lot of energy, and so I would go to yoga every day or whatever that was offered, and ride all day, and then yoga at night, and so that was my in. And this was way before any of the sort of organizations, Yoga Alliance, or, you didn't need to do a certain amount of hours. We basically followed our teachers around, like touring with them almost. We would tour with them and follow them and take all their workshops and all the trainings. And I never really set out to be a yoga teacher. It just happened. And I fell for, it gave me a new world view, like the philosophy. This was like Kashmir Shaivism, like a tantric philosophy of unity, basically, non-separation. And that was way new to me. I had no experience of any of those ideas. So it gave me a world view, interesting ideas, but it also gave me a lot of rules to follow, and a lot of like yes and no lists, and good and bad. And I was in a pretty hard or physical type of yoga. And so I started out there and practicing this for quite some time, many years of a lot of physical hyperextension, so to say. Yeah.
Right. Was there a certain branch of yoga that you were doing 25 years ago? Because you're right, that was so long ago. Well, in the context of these practices in the West, that was a long time ago. What was the type or the thread that you were doing?
I practiced something called Anusara yoga, and so that came from Iyengar yoga, but it was a more kind of even more pose-oriented, but it was supposed to be heart opening, was one of their taglines. And I had so much fun in that system. I learned a lot, like a lot of the, let's see if I get this English word straight, but pedagogy.
Yeah, you did that well.
I got a lot of what I still use, even though I've put different words and different things into the toolbox, but I learned a lot of how to set up like an experience for someone else, a movement experience. So that was great. But my body was hurting, and didn't.
From the yoga?
Yes, like from all the, like now when I look back, there was a lot of hyper extension, a lot of like going to the extreme with everything. Like it was more, stronger. And it doesn't really suit my body type. Like I build a lot of muscle. I can definitely, like I love, getting really sweaty and, but
I like that too.
But I can't like contract my muscles at all time. Like I need to call on another source of power. Or at least switch between different layers of the power of the body.
Balancing it out. Is that, if I can recall, Anusara is brought from the work of John Friend, is that correct?
Yes.
So I am not someone who studied yoga, but I was in a Feldenkrais training. When I was in one of my Feldenkrais trainings, one of our main trainers, his lady friend at the time, was quite high up in that world. I don't know if you ever came across Skeeter.
Skeeter, no, I don't.
Yeah, she's in Hawaii, Maui, big surfer. And anyways, she did a session, and she was also a Feldenkrais practitioner. And so she did a session with me working on lunges, because this also was about 20 or so years ago. And I was really into skiing and all of that. And I remember she kind of brought in some of the Anusara principles along with Feldenkrais. The session lasted like 2 hours. And by the end, I was dripping in sweat, and I think not collapsed, but it felt like I had gone on a 10-hour
I can imagine.
But I do recall, Anya, some of the things didn't agree with my body in how we had been taught human movement through the Feldenkrais method. And so there was sort of this contradicting, are you sure I'm supposed to put that internal rotation in my femur? It actually feels very limiting.
Oh, totally.
Does that
You
make
did
sense?
inner spiral, and then you scooped your tailbone down and did outer spiral.
Yes.
And then you extended organically out from there. Yes. Yeah, those are the 5 principles.
I can feel my sacrum right now.
Yeah, it's like, no, I don't want to
screaming.
go there. Yeah, totally. No, and it was just like taught in, like in many traditions, it was just taught in a way that this is the only way. These are universal principles of alignment. And so if you come to that when you're 20, like I had been trained as a like basic level massage therapist, but I hadn't done like a full program. But I was working with bodies, I was feeling bodies, and I was feeling a lot more than what I could verbalize. And also then I was looking at movement, I was feeling the movements in my body, but I didn't yet have the knowing that I could say, hey, this feels like it's too much for me, or is there another way? And so it was a year process to get certified in this method, and you have a mentor, and you have to have all kinds of studies beforehand. But I remember I recorded a session, and I did, instead of inner spiral that you just said, the rotation of the femurs and everything, I said, okay, let's slide the pubic bone back and feel that whole sheet of fascia connecting to your cheekbones, and just like feel into that. And they said, no, you failed. And I said, okay, but it's the same action, but it's subtler. Yes, but I've never heard John say that. And so that for me, I was like, oh. And so I left the system shortly after. And there was a whole, situation with drugs and sex and retirement funds that happened on the SOAR headquarters also that made the whole school kind of crash down, actually. Yeah. So it doesn't exist anymore, really. Yeah.
Sorry you had to experience that, but it sounds like it was necessary to go to that next level.
It was necessary for everyone. There was a lot of creative control going on, what was being printed in publications, like how you could use that brand name and everything. So I think for me it was a good learning. It was a good learning of maybe how to not organize a school of movement.
Do you think that these old schools that are set up like that, in like another 20 years time, let's just say, will be gone?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure some will have like held on, and they're still there, clenched their jaws and butts, and they're like, we're here, we're gonna stay. But no, it's changing. But what I also noticed then is I teach something very different now, and then what I see that's not there, like in, let's say, the person that's coming who's in their early 20s or mid 20s, who haven't experienced any of that, sort of stricter or more disciplined, there is a lack of something. So like that brought something with it, but now it's a way of how can we foster discipline without it being too hard, but being able to say, hey, when you come into the room, you practice silence in the mornings, you just talk outside. These like simple things that, let's say in an ashram setting, you don't get to walk in if you're like chit-chatting on your phone or something like that. So there are certain things that I'm trying to bring with and trying to keep them alive, for sure.
I like that. And I know you and I have had some personal conversations over WhatsApp and that about trainings. And, we've been talking about that future trainings and what they look like. And I agree. I think that there's a level of rigor that's important when you're in a professional training, and that constraint can allow for that creativity to burst through. And it does seem like those old dogmas, the guru, follow the guru, and the student has no creative agency to create something really that's new. and be listened to, and just like you did in that example that you shared.
Yeah.
So interesting. So what was the next step from that world that led you to where you are now?
Well, I had like either a herniated disc or, something in my neck that was super painful that I got from some sort of shoulder stand or something like that I stayed in too long in another teacher's class. And so I was in a lot of pain, and everything that I was told to do within the system, it caused me so much pain. So I just thought, okay, I'm going to stop practicing yoga. I'm going to stop dancing. I'm going to stop moving in the way I'm moving. And we'll just see what I find. And I started asking everybody that I respected. I said, who do you think, this is what I'm going through, who do you think I should study with? And then I heard over and over that they said, oh, have you studied with Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen? I said, no, I've never heard her name. And I kept hearing it from, a few different directions. And so I looked up Bonnie, and I was in the States at the time, I couldn't get into a training with her because there were so few of them. But I got to work with one of her practitioners, and I did like some really long sessions with one of her practitioners or somatic practitioners, and like 4-hour sessions. And this person never touched me. She just guided my awareness in my body, and I was blown away. And I think I was ready. I'd spent so much time in my body, but I just had never gotten those cues. And I remember, coming up from like a forward fold or something like that, and all the cells in my body, they were tingling. And I'm like, oh my God, what's going on? And she's like, I think you're grounded. And I said, I've never been grounded in my whole life before. This is the first time I'm grounded. And I was like, wow. And the pain after 2 of those sessions, she never touched me, so I did like just tiny little slides, finding where my body was resting on the earth and like doing some small movements from there. And the pain was gone for 2 months. And then my regular patterning came back. But I was like, okay, I understand, because I had touched enough people to know that if they don't practice what I'm doing with them, it's going to just return. So I knew that. And so I thought, let's study this. Let's study with Bonnie. And then I realized a teacher of mine, like from the Anusara world, had been studying with her for 5 years already, and she was already merging things into this system she was then calling embodied flow. So Tara Judell. And so I started studying with Bonnie and with Tara, and that was just the whole somatic world opening up. It was a whole different.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That's so lovely. And so that was in the United States when you were doing those first sessions?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the woman named Chloe in LA, and she was great,
So good. That is such a great story. It reminds me a little bit of my Feldenkrais entry when I was recovering from my knee surgeries and doing some of these movement lessons just through audio tape. Of all things, on a Walkman. And we know what that is. Not everyone knows what a Walkman is.
Miss it, yeah.
Side A, side B. Yeah. But it was true. Having been physically fit, a fitness trainer, really athletic. It sounds like we have a very similar history there. And then to do something so simple and subtle, and just feel the whole body be light afterwards. It smacks you in the face a bit.
Totally.
Because you're like, what just happened?
Yeah, and how little was I doing? How much, could I have not had to have done? And so simple,
So simple. So at that time, were you practicing and teaching yoga as well?
Yeah, I started teaching around 2003 or something like that. Okay. And so I had only practiced a few years myself of yoga before I started teaching. And I had been, teaching this one style. And like you said in your experience, like being very sure of myself, this is what we do. We do it to create these emotions. So like we would work with opposing emotions, pretty much, or qualities. like this is for stability and freedom, or, you know, something like that. And so I had all the vocabulary, but I had zero embodiment, you know. But somehow I had still been in my body, but I didn't, you know. So it took some time. I had to take it piece by piece. But I pretty much started immediately. Like I always say that I'm a slow learner and a fast learner. Like if I pick something up, if my body picks it up, I have no problem sharing it with someone else. So I had picked up a few things, like a principle of yielding that Bonnie teaches. That's basically your body's relationship to gravity and anti-gravity. I had picked up some like nerves that they haven't really located in humans yet, but that are in whales, but I could feel it in my body. I can't remember now, but they go from the eye and like straight back through the brain. And so I was like adding a few of those experiences. And when I saw what happened when I started to practice or to teach yielding or gravity and anti-gravity, like everything just changed for the people. And so...
Can you explain a little bit about yielding? Not necessarily teaching it right now, but what is it exactly? Because I have yet to study with Body. Everyone's like, you have to do at least one workshop before she's gone. And I'm like, okay, we'll try.
Something with her. She's a very spiralic teacher, you know, so it's like, it's not straightforward, or you can just jump in wherever and have an experience. Well, yielding I experience it very much in orienting, like in what you do. Like when I learned orienting from you, that was like next level yielding for me. So yielding is basically pouring weight or weight bearing, and it's a harmonious sort of weight bearing. It's form and dimensionality, but without collapse or propping. So no overly tensed areas and no collapsed areas. And of course we know that in a body there will be tight areas, and there will be places that are, you know, slightly lack, you know, dimensionality. But it's the practice of feeling into that. So keeping your form while letting your weight pour to the earth. And as you release weight and as you release tension, you can also, you know, feel into the anti-gravity or the space. I always say it's like when you're on the beach and you have a bucket of water and it's half full, and then you start pouring in sand. And so the weight goes to the ground, but the level rises. So there's that like natural rebounds. So when we tap into yielding, there's more of a knowing of where you are. So you feel into like it's a direct conversation with the body. I'm here, and there's space, and the tight areas can, you know, can still be there, and they can be informed by this other thing that's going on. And sometimes you can also release that tightness, you know, and let that stand on the ground instead of being held. So it's a good way for, you know, a lot of yoga is like this upward tightening, lifting away from the ground sort of practice. Yeah. So this is a grounding, dropping everything to the earth sort of.
Lovely. Support, finding that support from
support
the
before
earth.
movements is what Bonnie says always. So.
So Bonnie, so her body of work is body-mind centering.
Yes.
And so how have you blended that? Do you teach a classic yoga class still?
No, I don't. But there will be, if it's in a yoga setting, like let's say it's through an online yoga studio, or if it's like a yoga training, we definitely have yoga postures in there also. But first, there's always the somatization of something. So let's find it first. Let's let it move by itself, you know, initiating from a body system or a body part. You know, talking to people while they're in movement and they're in free movement always first. They might, if it's, you know, newer practitioners, I might guide them a little bit first, and then I let them go to explore. And I'm there holding form for them, you know, what they might explore, but I'm not guiding any poses.
Got it.
Yeah, just like you would guide, 3 points of connection to the ground, but you're not saying lift your arm, now lift your leg, do this. You're just like reestablishing, this is what we're doing, this is what we're with the bones, float them in the fascia, float them in the muscles. Let's see, there's a relationship. So I see my work as like reminding them of that relationship. And then I might throw in some asana also. But it's becoming less and less so. And I don't want to shoot myself in the leg here, but I'm also, I'll shoot myself a little bit. I'm also less and less interested in yoga, like I'm interested in something else, but that's, I can't teach it in a strict form. I can't tell anybody what they're going to feel, what they're going to do. And especially not after learning from you and the other, nervous system teachers. Like there's so much more I understand about what the body holds. So I feel okay with using the poses as sort of the vehicle for what we're exploring in. Yeah.
As an entry point. The word that kept coming to me as you were describing how you now teach is liberation. There's like a liberating.
Yes, for sure.
Freedom. And I mean, I'll just share what I've seen happen where I live here in Vancouver. I don't know if you know this, but the Lululemon headquarters is like literally there.
Oh, really?
I when I walk to get milk and lemons and basic groceries, I walk right by their massive headquarters in Vancouver. And so yoga really exploded here a long time ago, obviously. But the past year, I have watched many, if not all of the big yoga centers close down because of the state of the world and not being able to have group classes. And it's almost bittersweet in a strange way, because when I would walk home in another part of my area that I live in, I could see into the centers, and it just felt so restricting to see everyone crammed in, 50, 60 people sweating. Yes, they're moving, again, really good. They know they're there because they need to do something. But there was you could just feel the energy of, dare I say, unconsciousness.
Yeah.
Just following.
Yeah.
And I do know from some of the classes I've taught, sometimes, and I'm being very general here, and I know you'll understand this, the hardcore yogis or the hardcore fitness folks or the hardcore meditators, it was really tough for them to freeform and have them explore. It would be terrifying.
Yeah.
And you would watch it and people would, let's say they're on 4 points, because they are looking up. They're continually looking up to see what the neighbors are doing, what I'm doing, am I showing something more?
Yeah.
And you could I could sense the panic, or am I doing this right? I'm not sure. And this tension.
Totally.
And it's always so fascinating to me how we've just conditioned ourselves to not be okay with true exploration. So that's, I get that.
I totally get that. And that's also, I think, where the wave is at right now, is that so many of the yoga styles are becoming somatically informed, and I think that's a great thing. Something that I didn't see, it's almost 10 years ago I bumped into body mind centering. It was 2012. And so since then, that has become, people are not surprised by it. They might not have tried it before, but I think those sort of more rigid yoga classes, it's mostly what people meet when they meet yoga. And then after a few months or a few years, they want something more. If they are, and this is not a good or bad person sort of thing that we do, it's just that if we are, getting some of those glimpses those senses of self or reflection and feeling like, well, this practice says that it's supposed to offer me some sort of freedom. Like the goal of this practice is freedom or embodiment. And so why am I not, And so I think it's really important, why am I not free? Why am I in your way of like, this is what you do with the shoulder? And you're like, well, I'm going to do this, And you're like, well, maybe not every time. Yeah, so it's interesting.
It almost feels like it's interesting. There's a template, isn't there, to all of these physical practices. And even if I think back to my days in the fitness world, I was born into the generation where we were teaching people to contract and tighten their core all the time with every movement. And then when I got into my Feldenkrais training, it just flipped that on its head and made so much sense. And there'll be some people listening to this going, what? You're not supposed to hold your core in when you do all these movements? And the answer is no. It depends what you're doing in the context, and the strain that brings into that gut.
Yes.
Where our emotions and the viscera and
for sure
the vagus nerve and all of that is just
super tight and holding around the organs. And also I felt like one thing that I wasn't taught was that the whole body needs to participate. Like we can't really we'll do one thing, but then the whole body needs to take part of it. So if you're only in the core, well, like the whole body is like the core, this is the whole thing. And like, so you can spread out power in the body, and then it just becomes so much more understandable for the body, what you're doing,
100%.
Yeah.
It's interesting how martial arts, someone who's a real skilled judo, karate, aikido, they kind of know that. There's an understood practice within that where there's flow, but there's strength.
And there's no hyperextension. Like everything's like a little soft. And like you say, they don't really have that like tight, that sort of, I'm ready for you. They're just like, they're more ready for, they're there. A different sort of balance.
So interesting. Okay, so you brought in body, mind, centering. What was the next piece? And I know that you're blending what you do now, and I want to talk about the classes you do so people know how to find you. But what was the next piece that led you to even finding the nervous system work?
Yeah, so I practiced, and then I practiced embodied flow that, that my friend created, the school that is a good blend of somatic practices and some yoga also. The yoga's there, but it's also like a little bit secondary, like we do a lot of rolling around, a lot of moving, a lot of,
flowing through. Well, one of our mutual friends, Jess, right? I knew her living in Whistler when I was in my fitness days, and she was hardcore into that world, and she's just softened her stuff too. So
this is what I teach, very much inspired by that sort of fusion when I teach yoga classes. But I also teach movement classes that will be, my own sort of blend of everything. But what led into the nervous system work was that I had never really, now I can see that I had been very anxious, all kinds of things that I had. But I was also very resilient, so I could be with myself, like I could be with, or I could freeze big emotions, but still live my life pretty well. And I was a good functional freezer, and so very good at that. And so, came from background with like one parent who was an alcoholic, all that kind of stuff, so just like really good from a young age, like, okay, so we keep this there and we keep going, So, I was, living in the world and doing the things I wanted to, but this definitely was not really touching in on any real emotions or any real intimacy. And that was not a problem until I became a parent. And when I became a mother, that was what came up. So I, at the same time, it's turning off the sound here, there we go. At the same time that I became a mother, I lost my mom to brain cancer. And so she slowly kind of died slowly in front of me. She died when my son was 1.5, but she wasn't there. My dad disappeared also. He didn't die, but he chose willingly to not be in communication with me. The father of my child, we were not in relationship when I became pregnant, and then we were sort of in like a very immature relationship for some time, trying to make it work. And my family was caring for my mother, and I lost my work because I couldn't work anymore because I was a single mom, and I needed to work weekends and evenings as a yoga teacher. So I was like, I lost everything. That was my structure, and I was exhausted, because I was caring for my son, and I never got the rest I needed after like a long and delivery and surgery and all that kind of stuff. So I was really at the bottom. And I had never been there before. I was so low on energy that if a friend wanted to talk to me, I had to okay, I'm going to say some words, which means I'm going to, pass out later when I breastfeed because I don't have enough energy. So I was really, really at the bottom, never been there before. And so my nervous system, I started to feeling myself just tighten up into this knot of like catharsis, whoa, I had to go out in the yard and just scream, and I'm just oh my God, the neighbors, I don't care, I have to, leaving my baby inside, and I have to just get it out, and I'm happy that I was present with my son, but it was a really tough time for me. And so, but somehow, I don't remember so much from this time because I was so drained, but somehow I started Googling. I'm like, God, nervous system. I'm like, I'm messed up. I need something. I do not have the tools for this. I do have no of the tools I need. So I started Googling, and I found you. And I found your site, and I signed up for the 21-day nervous system tune-up. The first time I did orientation with you, and it's just for those who don't know, of course, it's Irene's pre-recorded course, there are no interactions. And I did orienting, and I had never felt that before. And I was like, wow, I'm very well trained in all things movement and somatics. And I was like, oh, that was the first time that I could actually separate sensation and emotion. To me, they had been the same thing, So it was a sensation had a lot of emotion to it, and I could move with that. But I had never tracked purely sensation, or at least not consciously. And I didn't know that they were different things, and that storytelling was a different thing. So I got so refreshed by that, and I've been a meditator for I don't meditate anymore, but that's. But I had been for many years, chanting, sitting for 2 hours a day, and feeling my brain restructure, really moving front brain to back brain. But there was no time for that in single parenting at that point, And I was so sleep deprived. I wasn't sleep. I'm I can't meditate. I'm going to fall asleep immediately. Yeah. So orienting was mind blowing to me, and I think it took me 6 months to go through that 21-day course, because I did it, and then I practiced, and then I was like, okay, so I'm ready for something else. And so the somatics were not so new to me, but the awareness that I could be in the somatics were new to me. So I took that grain of gold from orienting, and I brought it into everything. I tried to bring it into everything, and I practiced many times a day. It was my lifeline, and so that was really powerful for me, that I could be close to myself, because I realized I am just I'm pushing myself out of myself, and I didn't think I was, but I am, and I have to see that. And so I could access intimacy with my son, intimacy with the people around me. And I would say, as far as the last 5 years of this practice has revolutionized the experience of who I am and what my life is. And those are big words, but it's actually really true. So
wow. That's so interesting. It's funny to me, your son is just is older than he is, but he's not.
He's not.
It's a weird, yeah. And so you're right. It would have been about 4 or 5 years ago when you had that scream. I love that. I think that's such a great piece for me, because the fact that you had the insight to go and do that and to scream and to Google is promising to me for the future, because it shows that there's just this natural inclination to look for that, the nervous system, because I believe that we know deep down unconsciously that that's the thing that we have to look at, and then it informs everything. So thank you. I didn't know that depth of the story. That's so great. So now when you're working, what do you do? Tell me what your week is like on average with your classes.
Yeah. So I have, no real classes really. I have some live trainings that are, in my little space that I'm here right now. It only fits 6 people. And so we do that. I teach a yoga teacher training right now, which is super influenced by all the somatics and all the nervous system work. So that's actually very exciting, to be able to sit in the room and listen to people and really understand what's going on and to help them through. So that's good. And then I teach a little bit online, perhaps one movement class. And then I teach my nervous system through regulation through movement class once a week. And so we practice some movement together. And that's, for the people that most of them are connected to you and connected to other teachers, but they need it in Swedish, you need to hear it in your mother tongue. Yeah. And to practice with somebody and get it in your own words and your culture, even though it's very similar to Canadian culture or American or but it still has those cultural small cultural differences that are relevant for people when they're finding this work. For some people, I would say it's relevant. So I have those sessions. So it's not that many, and
they are in Swedish, just so that.
Yeah, everything's in Swedish.
So if you're Swedish and you're Swedish, if that's your language, this is your girl.
Yes.
That's so great.
Yeah. So that's what I do. And then I do have some private clients where they can come for some sort of movement. I don't have any private lessons in yoga, but we do all kinds of therapeutic stuff for mostly for the nervous system, but it's through movement. It's just through presence and presence training and staying present. In my culture, I don't know about Canada, but in my culture, it's just to stay with an emotion is a big deal here, to work on that capacity, to stay with an emotion and to track it and to titrate and to learn all those things. So for the people that are in my classes and need extra support, they also come.
For privates.
Yeah, for some privates.
I would say Canadians are of the same breed.
Yes.
Don't feel that functional drugs and all that. So I would dare I say when we were in Sweden a couple of years ago, maybe there was even a little bit more functional freeze from what I could feel. That was my sense. However, I also felt like there was a little more regulation as a whole, but I was not there long enough to really get into that. So it's hard to know.
Interesting.
Yeah. Interesting. The dynamic in the course that we taught, the up and down work, it was a different field than what I experienced teaching in, say, America or Canada. Not better or different, just you could tell there was something different that we had never experienced. I would say that there was quicker opt-in, if you know that word. People opted in faster to the exploration, but of course everyone was there because they wanted to be there. So they were already open to that idea of flow and exploration and curiosity. But I'm sure if you were to take a bunch of businessmen from corporate world Sweden, it would be like
it would be different. Yes. I think a lot of the people that came there were from the yoga community and the butterfly. Yeah.
Okay, so here's another question, which I won't be able to understand your answer. It's not even a question, but because there's probably some people listening from Sweden. If you were to, in your mother tongue, say to the Swedes your wish for them, what would it be?
As in for all the Swedes, or just for
those interested in being piqued by their curiosity is piqued about your work and the nervous system work and the movement work. What would you say to them, just so they can hear it from your language?
Totally. Så detta är ett sätt att lära sig genom väldigt, väldigt enkel rörelse. Väldigt, väldigt enkla tekniker. Att stanna nära dig själv. Att kunna känna dig bekväm med att vara hela dig. Att följa impulser. Med impulserna som du kanske döljer eller som vi säger funktionellt fryser bort. Att lära dig hur du kan hantera mellanläget innan du stänger av eller innan du blir för arg. Och det är helt fantastiskt vad de små teknikerna gör ett stort skifte. Så ni är jättevälkomna. Kontakta mig om ni vill. Did you get that?
You're definitely a little bit hearing that. Yeah, no, I love listening to you speak. Sometimes, Anya, I actually just listen to your stories.
Oh, you do? I love that.
Yeah, no.
I can see your voice messages just in Swedish, Irene.
Please,
Yeah,
I can fall asleep to them.
I'll do my really mellow voice, and you can. I'll send you one later.
The one word I caught was impulse. Did you say impulse?
Impulse. I said impulse. Just following your impulse, like to learn how to honor the impulses. That's something that you shared in Smart Body, Smart Mind, and that's also something that I started practicing really to a T, everything. And I think there's this idea that if you follow your impulse, you're going to behave inappropriately. You're going to, be all woo-woo all over the place and reckless with other people or say anything. And it's nothing like that, because there's a balance. And if you know an impulse, you can always say no to that impulse right now. You can hold it, but you can feel it. And if you know that you're holding it, you know that you're holding it, and you know the reason for it. Like, okay, so it's inappropriate for me to jump up and down or roll on the floor. Like I said the other day, like it's inappropriate for me to drop to the floor and roll down the aisle of a wedding, It's like, that's inappropriate. Like maybe I want to do that, Maybe I want to roll on the benches in the church and do stuff, but it's like, no, I'm not going to do that because
contact dance workshop.
Totally, at all times. And because that's also what you learn boundaries. I love that. I use that in one of your questions, and I know we're going to end very soon, but I just wanted to touch in one of the main questions was how do you integrate? How do you integrate nervous system regulation, movement practices into something else, without having to be like, oh, now I'm into this, I'm going to drop everything else. It's like you taught a lesson in Smart Body, Smart Mind. Can I say
Please.
Something about the lesson? Yes, okay. Where you listen to impulse and you turn your head a little bit, like you find the direction, you go with that first, you don't doubt the direction, you just go with it, and you do that, and you find the boundary, and you honor the boundary, and then you go back, and you play with it, but you don't go past the boundary. And so that's impulse also. It's I'm following impulse and I'm finding my boundary. So then we take it out of the small somatic movements and we're like, okay, so I'm honoring my impulse, and that also makes me find my boundaries in life. And so you don't become a crazy person. You become way more sane and just more wise. And so what I would do to integrate, for those of you who like are studying with Irene or listening a lot to Irene or other teachers, it's like, if you're teaching movement, like take something that you've had like a transmission, like you've had a real experience, you're practicing it, you've done it not one time, but you're doing it, you know, and it's something that you can see little and you can see it big, like this is little in my body, but this practice in the world would lead to another world. Yeah, macro and micro, like how they relate. And so I would start maybe a class like that, you know, okay, please come to the floor, and then guide that, and then take it into, can you move that impulse of movement through, and then start listening to other places that want to initiate movement, and then you have that sort of seed of something that's really potent, whether it comes from a teacher or if it's something that you make up yourself, but you use that and then you sort of just like thread that through. And so then you don't have to throw your occupation out, but you can just weave it in, you know? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
No, thank you for that. I love that, because there is this thought that, oh, I can't bring my past practices into...
Right.
It's like, of course you can, and it's an art. It's an art form to alchemize everything that you've learned before with the new pieces, and then move forward with it. And there's power in that, good power.
Yeah, a lot of power. And then also you have all that other experience with you. That's not wrong experience. It's just other experience. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. I think that's a wonderful place
Yes,
to end.
Me too. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I look forward to following all that you do and continue to do.
The same. I'm right behind you. I'm like hooking on to where you go. Listen to you. Yeah, it's great.